Without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker for today. Her name is Esha Chiocchio, and she studies issues of culture, community, and climate change. She's worked on documentary and commercial photography assignments all around the world. She's traveled quite a lot. And in fact, some of the presentation she's going to be giving today, about half of it, is coming out of a project she did for National Geographic. I believe she also has a show and tell item.
Well, no, that's sort of.
Oh,
it's
okay.
just an issue that came out today that is relevant. So.
Okay. Her educational background, she got a BA in anthropology and in French, which makes her especially cool, at the University of Colorado, and she got an MA in Sustainable Communities from Goddard College. She also worked as a Peace Corps volunteer in Mali, which is part of the, obviously, the focus of her talk today. So this is coming not just from sort of more recent study, but also from her time living there. So without further ado, I will pass it over to her to begin her talk.
Thank you, Steve. So yeah, I want to thank Steve and Ian for inviting me here today. It's a great series. I was here last week and saw the speaker last week on Egypt, which I thought was great and really informative. So anyway, I'm just happy to be here, and I think it's such an interesting topic, especially as we move into a more digital age. We're all so connected, and in many ways more connected than ever before. We can have friends all over the world, people we've never physically met before, and exchange ideas all over. But I kind of want to propose a different way of being. And you know, in theory, we could live in our houses and work on our computers and have our food delivered right to our door and never interact with other people. But this talk is about kind of going back old school while we're also in that digital age. So just really quickly, my mom's philosophy when I was growing up was travel is the best education. And we did a lot of that all over the world. And like he said, I studied anthropology and French and really was interested in West African, well, I did my thesis, my honors thesis in undergrad on West African French literature, and really was desperate to go to West Africa. So I ended up going to the Peace Corps, as he mentioned. And it's interesting, we just realized, Chris and I, that we were both in the Peace Corps in Mali, a similar time frame. And it's actually seeing a real resurgence. I don't know how many, are there any other Peace Corps volunteer RPCVs in the house? Anybody considering Peace Corps? Apparently they're seeing the highest number of applicants since the 60s right now, which kind of surprised me. So anyway, I loved it, had a great time there. So I encourage that. So I did get placed in West Africa. I got placed in Mali. So here we have, so Mali is here for those who aren't familiar with it. And it straddles the Sahel and the Sahara. And at the time, it was the second poorest country in the world. So the average income was about $300 a year. But it was at a time of calm in the country. Now, you've probably heard, and I'm not going to go into the current political system, but it's not as safe now. But I was really lucky to be there then, because it was actually a really beautiful culture and everything. So I even hitchhiked all over Mali as a single white woman and totally felt safe everywhere. So that was cool. So anyway, another map of, just to put you where I was in Djenné, right here. So Chris here was out there somewhere. But anyway, so I was in the Djenné area. Now the northern part is very much in the Sahara Desert. You've probably heard of Timbuktu, so that's there. But then the lower part is in what's called the Sahel. So there is more agriculture, there's more water down there. So, and I was, you know, before I went, you hear stories of people from Africa with these distended bellies, and they're, you know, there's a lot of challenge happening, right? But this is what I found. I found people who were just so open and friendly and wonderful. This is Baba Qureshi, and he was one of the only people who could speak some French in my village. So I basically clung to him at the beginning, like, help, when I was trying to learn Bambara. But really fabulous people with great joy in their lives. So, and this is just to show you kind of what the scene was like. This is Djenné. I straddled both Jenne and Waya, my little village, and I'm going to talk more about Jenne in this talk. So this is the side of Jenne, but it looks very similar to Waya. So adobe houses, there's some water, but everything, there are animals roaming everywhere. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's thatch and adobe, and it's all kind of made by hand and of the earth. Very, simple in that sense. And water was pulled from wells. And so I'm just at the beginning just going to go through kind of what was life like there? What did I find when I was there? And then we'll go into this work aspect. So people use this. They had to hand water their crops this way, to grow their vegetables. Not a lot of vegetables except in certain seasons because of that. And then the grains were grown out in the fields. They're really dependent on rainfall for that. And then they got their protein mostly from fish and the animals that they raised. And they would fish with little nets. So they had nets on sticks, and they would, the next picture shows it better, but they had great fun doing it, diving in, and they'd have these giant fishing festivals. I would hate to be a fish in the Bonny River that day because, they're just going through and scooping up every last fish. But anyway, so they have these great fishing festivals, and this is a great example of community work, which is what I'm going to be talking about. They really... they do a lot of things as a community, and there's a real importance to that, I think, that we can carry forward into our own lives. I think there's a tendency in American culture for us all to kind of do this, in our own little bubble. So I really appreciated their community work there. And so while the men are fishing, the women are singing and dancing and kind of praying for a good fishing tournament or fishing event, And song and dance is so integral to the whole culture there, and it just made everything so lively. And they start super young with their dancing. And this is another thing that really brings joy. It's another lesson, is the happiness aspect, and how can we bring happiness and joy into our lives. So no instruments. He's got the back of a lollipop that has a built-in whistle. Do 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 do, like this, and the little girl's dancing, So like finding the joy wherever it comes. So a lot of the fish from that Bonny River is dried and stored or just eaten that way. So there's a close-up of the fish. And so many of them are so small. The sustainability part is a little bit lost, or the, protection of wild spaces is, anyway. So, and just the meals, everybody, there's a lot of shared meals. So several people would sit around a bowl and eat with their hands. Very simple meals, but people were healthy there. They have their grains and like this, some leaves and vegetables and things to go in. And some of the men eating. So the men eat together and the women eat together, and then the kids are kind of wherever the kids end up. So just showing that community, eating together. And you get really good at the beginning, you're putting food out everywhere, but you get really good at eating with your hands when you live there. Okay. So Jenne, this is the main thing I want to talk about. So Jenne, this is the Mosque of Jenne. It's the largest mosque in West Africa. It's the largest mud structure in the world. This is me and my replacement, Ashley, with some of our friends there. And now that we do have phones, I'm still in pretty regular contact with Hamadou there. So it's kind of cool that we kind of bridge the old school when we didn't have phones or anything there with this new technology. And they've really leapfrogged. So they have their cell phones, but they never had landlines, for example, or even internet, anyway, it's funny. So now the population there, so this mosque is super important. Mali is about 90% Muslim, about 9% animist, mostly in the Dogon region, and about 1% Christian, or so it was when I was there. And I wasn't sure what to expect being in such they are really a Muslim culture. Everyone prays 5 times a day. Everyone goes to the mosque. And I hadn't had a lot of experience in Muslim culture before I went there. And I just really fell in love with their value system. It's not at all like we see in the news of kind of this extremist, Muslim or the Islamists who are kind of taking over certain regions. So anyway, they were just super welcoming people. And Yeah, we were not connected at all. I have a little note here about letters at the time would take anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months each way. And so we were, Chris can probably relate, pretty isolated from, and they were very isolated from the rest of the world in that sense. So this mosque is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And to keep it intact, the entire village comes together, about 12,000 people, to put a new layer of mud on the exterior of the mosque. And it is an incredible celebration of community work. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about. They really have fun with it, and they protect this beautiful structure from the downpours of the rainy season. And it's I don't know, about 110 or so years old now, that mosque. So we're going to go through kind of a day of the mudding of the mosque here and what that community work looks like. So they ferment mud out in little mud pits out in the flats near the town center, and then bring it on their heads in little woven baskets. I don't know how you can see this. So they bring the mud to the mosque, and the women carry water. And I want to just point out too, this is not, nobody's in hijab, it's very, there's a lot more freedom there. It's a lot more open, which I loved. Anyway, so all the women carry the water on their heads. I was never this good at it. I always showed up with water all over me. But, certainly not perfect, the open sewers. And there's a lot of plastic bags now from them coming in from China. But anyway, so the women come with the water, and then the kids really get to play in it. And they mix the mud. So they are totally coated, mixing the mud, but so much fun. I mean, what kid doesn't love to play in mud, right? Totally sanctioned day of dirtiness. And then the kids distribute it to the masons. So you can just see, and they wear little things on their heads to help balance those little mud baskets. And it's a competition. So every neighborhood has a section of the mosque that is their section to coat with the mud. And so they can everybody's running and there's mud flying, and it's just this kind of crazy scene where they get a little competitive, and they strap together palm trees, portions of palm trees, and make big ladders that you'll see in a minute how they work that. So they're moving the ladders around. And then dangling from these ladders and plastering the mud. So you can see the texture of the walls just from the heads. Has anybody worked with Adobe before? Put your hands in the mud. Isn't it great? Yeah, I helped build my house in Mali. It's just so super fun. That's great. Yeah, nobody fell. I was amazed because they're like this, and amazingly, they did okay. But it was all done with this sense of urgency. Everybody's kind of running here and there and carrying their mud. But so much laughter. I mean, it's actually just a super fun event. We all looked like this. I mean, I was covered just like them. My poor camera, I'm trying to shoot, and there's mud balls hitting the sides and everything. It's a really fun scene. So anyway. And then this is from the roof of the mosque, looking down into the back courtyard and the city beyond. So it gives you a little bit of the cityscape and just how that interior space is. And in order for me it's strictly forbidden for non-Muslims to go into the mosque, except on this one day. And the only way you get in is if you're working. So I had to carry buckets of water with me while I was working, because that's what the women do. So I was carrying buckets of water to the roof, keep it all going. So these are the men on the ladders doing their thing. You can see the loudspeaker here where they did the call to prayer for their prayer 5 times a day. And I was just always amazed at the skill that they had for climbing up this scaffolding on the side. It's actually quite high. It's hard to tell from this picture how high it is, but the next one will show better. But yeah, the masons were the real workhorses on that. So, and they did it in 2 separate days. So this one was done, and then the next day this one's done. So that one is just getting finished. And you can see the mud drying there. I don't know how well you can see it on the top. They have ostrich eggs. and that's supposed to symbolize fertility and long life. So there's that. And then to the end of the mudding, somebody's got to fire a gun sometime just to make some noise, right? And I love this guy because he has the quintessential Malian hat. It's a straw hat with leather and little adornments. And then he's got his very baggy clothing. And then he's got a goatskin backpack that's hand-painted goatskin backpack, and his plastic Chinese shoes. It's just so perfect, his little outfit. I love it. Anyway, and then this is how we all looked, of course. So we had to deal with that, but everyone's just totally covered, which was pretty fun. So everyone then goes to the river, and they all wash all their clothes and their bikes and their bodies and everything. It's just this, big bath time. Everyone kind of strips down and jumps in the river together. Super fun. So. And there's Fanta. She's scrubbing up in the river, saying goodbye with her big Malian smile. So anyway, so that's Mali. So what do we take from Mali? So what I took from Mali, some of the lessons I learned from Malian culture, is just the importance of that community building, that the relationships and the sense of belonging that gives to everybody there. I felt like everyone was very well cared for in the village, regardless of their ability. We had people who had polio, for example, and they were in wheelchairs or whatever, and they were always all just as happy and integrated in the community as everyone else. And the kids are integrated, and the elders are integrated, and everybody kind of has a role to play. And so I appreciated that piece of it. So again, the kids and the elders, and this sense of nayan communique. It's like when people are eating, everybody is asked. If you're walking by somebody eating, they're like nayan communique. It means come eat, come eat. They really support each other. So I really appreciated that piece. And then the laughter piece. So in Mali, and I'll go to the next slide on this one. This is one of the big takeaways about Malian culture. So. Oh, I didn't ask Chris his Malian name. That would be important. He might even get up here and demonstrate with me if I ask him really nicely. So in Mali, everybody has, when you're a Peace Corps volunteer and you arrive in the country, you're baptized with a Malian name. And that name is super important because there's a thing called joking cousins. So my name there was Aisha Koulibaly. What was your name? Keita. Shoduna, yeah. So if we were to meet in the market, we would first greet each other like, oh, iniche, ikakene wa. So, hi, how are you? And then we would eventually we'd ask each other names. So, iniche, Itogo. Usman, Jamu Keita. Keita. Ibai Shodun. So I would start immediately joking with him. Yeah, Ibai Shodun means you eat beans. And then other people would say, Ibai Wuludun, which is a little worse, right? You eat dogs. And then the worst one I heard was, Iye Njonye, Onkata Sugula Mbena Yifere. You are my slave. We're going to go to the market. I'm going to sell you right now. So it's all in jest, and they're laughing hysterically. And it's in the first moment that you meet someone, right? You've just told them your name, and all of a sudden they're telling you that you eat beans and dogs, and they're going to sell you at the market, right? So, and I think this does a lot for their community, for their health. And I found on the Mayo Clinic, there are a lot of benefits to that laughter. You hear about laughter yoga is one thing that, I don't know if anybody's heard about that out of India. People do laughter yoga where they just sit around and laugh together. Just laugh at each other. So anyway, that was one little benefit, and I do think it keeps the society healthy and strong. And this was an interesting study. It was actually I want to get this right, it was 148 studies involving 300,000 people found that there is a lower risk of dying in people who have great social connections, have a 50% lower risk, and it's just as strong a risk factor as obesity. So if you do not have good social connections, it actually increases your chance of early death as much as poor diet and being obese. So I found that really fascinating, and I think it's something that, anyway, I think it's something that we need to take more seriously, in our culture. And similarly, the Harvard study, you might know about the Harvard study. It was started in 1938, and they started with 268 Harvard students, and it eventually expanded it to include, in the 70s, 456 Boston inner city kids. And it's since gone on to incorporate their children, so now 1,300 people. And the thing that they really came to was that those relationships are the most important thing. So close relationships, more than money or fame, are what keep people happy through their lives. Those ties protect people from life's discontents, help to delay mental and physical decline, and are better predictors of long and happy lives than social class, IQ, or even genes. I thought that was really a strong statement. So anyway, I want to encourage us to all go play together and work together. And again, this is the lead researcher from the Harvard study. So relationships, 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 which I feel the Malians do really well. So when I came back to the States and started having my family and kind of settling down here in American neighborhoods, I realized I felt pretty isolated at first. I felt like I had friends, but they weren't neighbors. And I think we can, I don't know, I felt that way. I don't know if you can relate or not. So I decided to kind of seek out another way of being here in the States, where my kids had people to play with right at hand. We had multi-generational influences, so from old people to middle age and young, all around, because I think those influences are really important. So, so I moved to a place called the Commons, which is right up the road in Santa Fe, also that Adobe look, but very different. And so just the idea of community life, and it's basically taking the village model from Mali and plopping it in a city in the United States is basically what that looks like. So everybody knows each other. You're cooking and you need an egg, and we use the internet, so this is how the digital side comes in. Send out an email, and the next thing you know, you've got an egg right there. And this is our effort to have those intact relationships where you're seeing people all the time, the way I think people were really evolved to live. We grew up in small villages. That's how our species evolved, and I think maybe we're more like bees than we realize sometimes, We need that hive. So anyway, what I love about this too is we do have running water and electricity and access to stores, so we get all the comforts, but we also get this kind of village feel. So I'm just going to take you on a little tour of kind of life in the Commons now. So we have work days, and this is Wendell helping out on work day, and we really do encourage the kids to participate. It's one thing I saw in Mali a lot is that the kids always had a role to play, and that teaches them skills. It gives them confidence in who they are and how they fit in society. And anyway, I think giving kids opportunity for that is really important. Now, one of the things we do is we're technically a condominium association, but and so everybody gives 8 hours of work towards the community, so we don't have high fees. And the kids don't have to work, but they can work. And when they do, we put money kind of in a kitty for them, and they get to decide. They have their own meetings. They get to decide how they spend it. So they bought a trampoline. That's my daughter doing the splits up there, that they love. And it gives them that feeling of empowerment to earn their own money, to work for that, and to then spend that the way that they want. And so our most recent equivalent to the mudding of the mosque was the building of the bike shed. So we decided we needed a bike shed for all of our bikes, and this is Phil building the thing, and then we had to stucco it, of course. And so this is us stuccoing, putting the plaster on that bike shed. And it's a lot of fun. I actually really look forward to these work days because everybody gets to talk about what's going on in life, exchange ideas. There's a lot of laughter and play. And we do still have our technological devices. There is still the bridge there, but Sometimes they get a little plastered. But we put them aside, and that's really the point, is just the point of yes, technology is great, but slowing down and taking the time for those relationships is actually really important. Anyway, this is the team just before lunch. So similar to what Dr. Winograd said about the Egyptian revolution, she was there cooking while people were out in the streets. So we also have, somebody there cooking, waiting for us to come in for lunch. So we have, lunches breakfast and lunch on workday are included. And then every week we also have 2 meals a week that people sign up to cook as part of their work hours. And that's just a great opportunity for people to just, one, not have to cook, especially working families, but to connect with each other. And we always do organic and as local as possible to keep everybody healthy. So again, we're just close-up of the food. And then, this is kind of the typical scene. We've got all ages. Alice we'll see another picture of her later. She's our 96-year-old. But, we've got teenagers and, we've got the whole spectrum of people there. And I think that makes for a rich community. Do you know Alice? Yeah. I love Alice. She's still she's amazing. She's still seeing clients and everything. She's amazing. And we have, our community meals, and people can have their hours be used for setting up, cleaning up, cooking, etc. And then we've got, that's Wendell again, actually, by chance. Anyway, playing in the background. And it's nice to be able to have that proximity with dinner, and the kids can run around and whatever. And for me, as a working mom, it's a godsend to not have to cook so often. Anyway, and then we have all kinds of other events, like we have a 4th of July barbecue, and then our big one is this next one. It's our annual feast day. And these are people play cooperative games and blow bubbles, and people back here are singing. And it's a great time for people to get silly and have fun with their friends. So we have the clown come in and paint our faces and all of our friends' faces. And the circle, it's just an opportunity for everyone to be recognized and to feel connected, kind of like that Malian society and circle. Here's Alice again. And to honor our 96-year-old and our 6-month-old. So there's Alice, and then our youngest, Margaret. And of course, like the Malians, we got to bring some dancing in. So we always get a great band. These guys were great, Partizani, if you haven't heard of them. All right, so then strategies for Malian-style relationship building. And there are lots of ways to build community, right, in our own lives now. And here are some ideas just about getting out and talking to your neighbors and dancing and talking through your differences. At the Commons, we really strive to, we operate by consensus. So it can be really hard to get certain things done. But it, I think, leads to a stronger community when people have to work through those differences. So that's, I think, a good way. And so this Syracuse University came up. Has anybody seen this already? Syracuse University came up with the How to Build Community poster, which I think is great. I don't know how well you can read it now. There's a lot of little details in there. But just that idea of kind of treating your community like a little village and getting to know your neighbors and inviting people for dinner or just, arranging some kind of a little potluck or something are some of the takeaways from Mali. So I'm going to leave that up here. And that's it.
Just want to invite Chris Duvall to come up here. If you don't know, Professor Duvall is a professor here at UNM. You can take classes with him. Anthropology department, geography department. I always think you're anthropology because of your work, but geography department teaches a lot of classes on food, actually, on like sort of the circulation of food and customs and cannabis and so forth around different regions of the world. You maybe get to eat some food, but I don't think The cannabis probably doesn't come up in class. But in any case, he's going to be the respondent tonight, and also take your questions
Careful for the.
in just a few minutes.
Yeah.
So thanks, Steve. So again, I'm Chris Duval. I'm a professor of geography, and I was a Peace Corps volunteer also. I was there in 95 to 97, and Esha started the year I left, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We might have overlapped, but I was in the other side of the country. So what I experienced was different in a lot of respects from what Esha describes, but Jenne is a very, very famous place. And if you study African history, that mosque is a really important site.
Mm-hmm.
Jenne is a really important place. People have lived there for 2,500 years, something like that. There's a lot of really important archaeological sites. And I don't know your experience, but volunteers I knew who lived up there could walk along and find sites on the ground. So it's a place with a really deep, really rooted history. That rootedness is really crucial to thinking about community and the types of cultural and cultural traditions that you saw illustrated up here. I was at a conference last week in Northern Ontario looking at Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous communities, and Canada is really progressive in terms of thinking about Indigenous communities and how they're represented and active shapers of universities and of government. And one of the things that stuck with me there is thinking about the experience of settlers, is what people like me are called. But I have European ancestry, and I can trace my people back to England and Germany and whatnot. And we have a family history of settling in Wyoming and whatnot. A sense of placelessness that exists for a lot of people who have a history that's similar to that, whose people whose ancestors came from elsewhere. And the phrase that I heard up there, from some of the First Nations people that I was working with was, well, the question that their communities have a lot of times is, well, when are you going to act like you're going to stay here, right? Instead of moving around and not investing in a place and investing in a location. And that's the same sort of set of struggles that we have in the U.S. It's just not talked about as much, talked about in a colonial context, and that's kind of what we have to understand here in New Mexico. New Mexico is a great place to kind of think about the colonial past, the colonial present, and how it still shapes our interactions. And in Mali, that was very present in the fact that, well, people, if you wanted to get a high-paying job, if you wanted to work for the government, you had to learn French, which is a colonial language, of course. And so the histories in West Africa, learning how to maintain traditions in the face of change, whether it's change of different governments coming in, different languages being present, or it's change like plastic bags, right? Those plastic bags, if you talk to people who've lived there, in West Africa for a long period of time, people can remember before and after plastic bags. And so a really big challenge of communities and traditions is a couple of things. One is making sure that you have that tradition being passed on. So having the elders and the youth together is really a crucial aspect of that. And that's a lot of times missing, where we have in our society people moving quite a bit, moving to different places. The other really crucial thing is thinking about change. How do you incorporate change? Because change happens no matter where you are. How do you deal with it? How do you maintain what's important to you and your people, right? And so cell phones are really a great example. In West Africa, allowed people to suddenly have contacts over distances. You didn't just lose your people who went to the cities. You could also understand market prices. You could understand all these different things that were going on that you didn't have access to. Same for us here, right? And a lot of times, this is my daughter, Rosa's over here. She's embarrassed now. Right? We were sitting out front just before coming up here, and she looked and she counted the number of people walking by like this, right? So how many people do you see? How many steps a day do you do looking at your phone, right? These are really important technologies, and they've helped people feel connected in our society, but it's kind of it's a plus or minus sort of connectedness. So we have to think about how that is a help to us, but also maybe it would be good to look up from a phone now and then and be interacting with the people directly around you, right? So just a collection of thoughts based on some shared experience that I have with Esha, but also based on just kind of thinking about these issues as well, and thinking about how communities exist and don't exist, right? And how we can work towards that in the long term. All right, that's my 2 cents. Let's take some questions and have a conversation, please.
I have a question for you. I also was in East Mali in
Oh, cool.
1993.
Mhm.
And so my question is, given what you experienced while you were there, and thinking about how this later Islamic radicalism came in, I'm wondering if you think it was just an import that came in, like an external wave that came in funded by the Taliban, or do you think it was homegrown and
Yeah, I think, I don't know for sure, 'cause I wasn't on the ground to really see it happen, but my sense is that it's a little of both. I don't know if you ever made it up to the Timbuktu, Gao region, but I think there is it's almost a different culture. It is a different culture up there. You've got this Tuareg culture that's in many ways very separate from the southern part of the country, and I think that they have felt separate and felt like they didn't want to be ruled by the kind of lower Malian government. And so I think that was the real initial impetus. It has gotten to this extreme. You've got these Islamists who have kind of stoked that flame. And so it's taken kind of a darker turn than just we want to be independent up here in the north. It's gotten very violent and very, it has this same kind of flavor that we're seeing in other parts of the world, where they're getting much more strict in terms of women. They're burning all kinds of incredible documents in Timbuktu. So I think it's a combination of things that led to that, is my sense. I don't know if either of you have a different sense of that, but that's my...
Yeah, I would just add that it's colonial, right? It was a colonial strategy of the French to split up the Tuareg or Tamashek people that exist from Mauritania and southern Morocco to Chad. It was a very large area. They were well organized, and the French determined that it would be best to split them up and not give them any representation in any of the governments.
Mm-hmm.
And 60 years later, that's the fruits of the strategy.
And I'm going to butt in briefly, because this is also my area of study, and just add that a good example of how there is some outside influence is a lot of the, we've heard about the burning of documents, for example. There was also a lot of Muslim shrines that had been around for hundreds of years that were destroyed by some of the forces because they were considered not Islamic enough or improperly Muslim because of some religious syncretism. So that was clearly a problem. That was clearly an influence coming from other people.
Mm-hmm.
You have a question? Oh, yeah, I was wondering about you mentioned that you did some work for National Geographic. I was just wondering.
Oh, well, the images of Mali were, I shot those for National Geographic, and those were in there, in the magazine. Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you, do the French still have a presence there? Because I heard their military might be involved in Mali and other parts of West Africa. I was wondering, what are they doing there?
Yeah, so the French do still have a presence. I mean, and they helped kind of fund the resistance to these northern groups who were coming in. So they helped kind of boost up the Malian government's military to fight against these Islamists who were coming down. And there's still a very strong relationship there between France and them, but it's an independent government. I mean, they have their own elections, they have their own, president and all of that. I don't know how to describe their relationship, except, their money is tied to, it was the French franc when I lived there, but now I guess the euro it's tied to. So I don't know how else to describe their relationship. They certainly do give money for the military. They help with things like that.
It's their sphere of influence,
Yeah.
is the term. They maintain a presence there primarily to make it so that other countries like the U.S. or Great Britain or what have you can't claim that there's an absence of presence.
Mm-hmm.
Neocolonialism is a term that's used for that. New colonialism, like an informal relationship. There's a question in the back of the... yeah, go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah, Esha, first I want to thank you so much for the talk. You gave us some really great stuff to think about. And actually, I'm going to jump in. I've got two questions for you.
Okay.
So the first one, you mentioned it in your intro of life in Mali. And you're talking about people going out and doing the net fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we talked about this a little bit in my office before we came over here.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the cost to benefit ratio of that kind of
Yeah.
destruction to the habitat.
Yeah, it's tough because, like I said, I would not want to be a fish in that river, and a lot of the fish that they are bringing out are quite small. So I don't feel like there's enough attention to letting the fish grow up and, be able to reproduce because, they are, I'm guessing that river is not producing as well as it maybe had. But then again, they have been there for thousands of years. And actually, I worked for 2 months on an archaeological dig in Djenné, which was really pretty amazing and fun. And anyway, we were trying to determine the age of the city when we were there. And we weren't exactly sure, but it was in that 3,000, 2,500-year-old range. And so there's a part of me that just feels like, okay, well, they've been doing this for thousands of years. And there are a lot of taboos that they establish. You can't fish during this period, or you can't do this then. You can't, there are all these kind of little things that I don't even know the half of them because they're kind of ingrained in their culture. And there are these unspoken things that people know that they can or can't do. And I think that is what keeps things continuing. But yes, fishing like that. But we do the same thing. We have these these giant boats with these huge nets that just totally scoop everything in sight, or like the dynamiting of the coral reefs that we talked about. So people are doing that sort of thing all over the place, unfortunately. It would be interesting to know what the state of the fish populations are, because they are doing this annually, So I don't know I haven't counted the fish, but yeah, it's a real question. And it is hard because they're trying to survive, right? This is their protein source, they're trying to survive. And it's hard to tell someone, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to stop fishing this river. It's like you trying to create a national park. You can't fish here anymore because we're trying to protect it. That's your livelihood and that's what you're surviving on. That doesn't go over so well, right? So it's a trick. Did you have a second question? And then?
Yeah, I'll make it real quick. I was really interested in the reconstruction or the repair of the mosque in Djenné. And I'm going to take you on a little trip. When I was a college student in the 80s, I traveled through Eastern Europe and I made it to Moscow and to East Berlin when there was an East Berlin. And you go and visit these communal housing blocks in complete disrepair. And I'm just curious about, how do you get that sense of ownership in the community to want to take responsibility for repairing a mosque when it doesn't happen in somewhere like East Berlin or Moscow?
That is a very good question. Well, I think it goes back to these very deep roots. People are really rooted there for generations and generations. They're very devout Muslims, and so I feel like there's a social pressure for everyone to participate. They do make it fun, too, and literally the entire village works on this together, whether they're cooking food as backup or they're actually plastering, everyone has a role to play. So I think that engaging the entire community, which can be hard to do from scratch, right? They've been doing this for so long, over 100 years now, that they've kind of figured out that system. I think making it fun is important. I find that with our, American style of this at the Commons, we have fun together and it makes you want to do it more, and we eat well together too. I think food is a real binder of people. I think it really brings people together and makes them want to talk with their neighbors and, sit around a good meal. So, yeah.
Sure. Just to go back to the previous thread about the French presence in West Africa, in that part of West Africa. I was a little bit north of Timbuktu in 2010, just shortly before the actual pressure was brought to bear from the north back down into the south. And I was struck by the number of people who walked up to my friend and I and asked us if we were part of the American contingent that was out in the desert. And I didn't know that there was an American contingent. This was 7 years ago. Only to discover, lo and behold, that of course there was. And tragically a few days ago in Niger, the very same kind of creep that the Americans have been known to do as soon as the French sort of would go in on the heels of the French, if you will, in a lot of hotspots around the world. And this seems to be one that is particularly bubbling, simmering, to its form, all the way from Chad across to Mauritania. And it doesn't get a lot of
Press.
press.
And honestly, I don't know a lot about that aspect of it. That
I
wasn't,
don't think you're supposed to know.
yeah. I don't know, do you know much about
Yeah, I
that?
do actually. In 2005, I was a PhD student getting funding from the federal government, and so I had to go do a cultural sensitivity training at the Marine Corps base in Quantico, Virginia. And at that point, they were planning to deploy military advisors, so I guess something like Vietnam in 1960, right? And so to my knowledge, there's a handful, 10, 20 American advisors scattered through northern and central Africa, so Mali, Niger, Chad area. And the concern has been that because the governments in the area don't have control over the desert area, the French don't really have a presence there, that there's essentially a vacuum of power, right? And so that makes it an opening for the bad guys, whoever you want to point to that. But there was concern about Al-Qaeda in that area, and I don't know whether there's a presence there or not, but certainly from events in Chad, Niger, and northern Nigeria, there is some sort of external presence stirring things up in a way that's not productive for most of the governments in the area. So there is an American presence there, but we don't know about it.
Yeah, one question. What is the relationship between the people and the central government?
The people what?
And central government.
And the central government when I was there or now or what's?
Well, when you were there?
When I was there? So that kind of depended. In my little village, so I kind of straddled two worlds a little. I was in a little village 20 kilometers outside of Djenné, and then I was also partly in Djenné. And in my little village, I felt like there was a lot less kind of influence from the government. There wasn't a school there. There wasn't a road. It was just a little dirt path that went out there. And so in many ways, they were like a little island, there. Whereas in Djenné, there was certainly more influence, and they had a mayor, and they had, kind of that structure that you would anticipate. And Djenné is very much a tourist center, kind of a mecca for West Africa, mecca in both senses, really. I mean, it's kind of a pilgrimage site for a lot of people. And certainly the national government did have a presence there, certainly with their schools, and they did have some electricity going. They were putting in some infrastructure and healthcare services. NGOs would come in and out doing various projects as well. I don't know how to describe the government presence. It wasn't like, it was pretty harmonious in Djenné at the time. People were generally pretty happy. They had like I said, their hospital and their clinics and their schools and whatnot that were from the government. Trying to think of what other government influences were really there. Nothing that really stood out more than that, beyond that.
Central government's poor and weak.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Is the life expectancy of people there similar to here?
Oh, I would say it's much less. I don't know the exact number. They are facing so many challenges there in terms of, malaria is one. I don't know if you got it, but I got it twice. And like the snakes, black mambo. I woke up with one literally a foot from my head, a black mambo one day. Anyway, I am amazed that they do live as long as they do sometimes, because there are a lot of things that are challenging. It's a tough life. They're happy and they bring joy into their lives in so many ways, but it's very physical, pulling the water, digging planting their seeds, which I think also keeps them healthy on one hand. I don't know the life expectancy. I should look that up. I don't know the exact rate. I know it's lower than ours. It's a high infant mortality rate as well, because they don't have, especially in the villages, there's no medical services. That's one. It's a side story, but one of my friends, I said hi in the morning, and then I went on my bike into Jenne, and I came back in the afternoon and found that right after I had said hello to her, she had just squatted down in the corner and gave birth. I was like, what? So anyway, it's kind of routine there, right? They have a lot of kids. But yeah, they're tough people, very tough people. Yeah, so, yes.
Would you say that the community culture was stronger in the small village that you were in, or in general?
Oh, very good question.
Or was there a difference?
There's definitely a difference. I would say it was stronger in the little village. I did see, however, my Peace Corps volunteers, or at least in my case, I was put with sorry about that, I just touched the microphone. I was put with the chief of the village, which kind of rotates. It's not that big of a deal, but anyway, I was put with the chief's family, and his youngest daughter, Hawa, became a good friend of mine. But I think there's a lot of influence that comes in if people want, I don't know, those plastic tchotchkes, and they want, whatever it is. And so she ended up going off and moving away from the village and working, I think in Sikasso or something. And I went and visited her down there at one point, and I felt so sad because she didn't have her vibrancy anymore. You could see she was just working this, street food kind of thing. And I found that very sad. I think that when they do kind of either go off to the big city or kind of stray from that close-knit community, it's harder for them. They don't have that support system. And so in Jenne, there was a mix. There were the people who had been there forever. So I had a room in a family's house in Jenne, and that family had been there forever. The father was a tailor, and they were great, and I felt that kind of sense of community. They knew everybody in the village. But then there were other people who had come in as guides, for example, or had come in from elsewhere, and you could really sense that they weren't part of that fabric, So it was a mix, definitely. But there are pockets within neighborhoods in the bigger city of Jenne, that do still have that close-knit aspect intact. But I'd say the village was super strong. They had lived there forever, and yeah. Yes.
Another question.
Yeah.
Just a little question. Do you have any thoughts about the impact that electricity is going to have when it becomes so prevalent in these places on the very issue of community? Is it going to segment people and allow them to sort of retreat, if you will, into their own little houses with their own light bulbs and their own sources of power, as opposed
That's a
to
really good.
being forced, in a sense, to come out and share things in a more communal way, or is it the other way around? I'm just...
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very good question. I know in my little village of Waya, my closest friend there, Amadi, has a cell phone now. And I asked him, I'm like, how do you charge it? Is there electricity in Waya? And there isn't yet. But he charges it a couple little villages over in Taga, and they have a solar panel there and whatever. And so I think that they're starting to move in that direction, but I haven't been back to see how it's affecting that. From what I hear from him, they're still very close-knit. I mean, he talks about, we did a big garden project when I was there. That was kind of my big tour de force. It's amazing how much effort it takes to do a very small project there. Anyway, and he said the women are, the garden is thriving. The women are, growing their vegetables, and it's just 2 wells and some fencing. But it's hard to grow vegetables there because you don't have the water in an area that's protected from animals, because their animals are roaming everywhere. And so he said they are still really using that and enjoying it, and people are, doing it. So I think, I don't know. I mean, if they get a millet, if they get a mill where they can process their millet and their rice and everything, and they don't have to, hand pound it where the women are all standing around hand pounding, that will be a loss to the community. That's where they chit-chat and, do their thing. And so it really brings up a good question. I don't know how that will be. Although Gen A had electricity, and some people had electricity when I was there, and they'd have their TVs out on the street, and everybody would come and watch soccer together, football. And so I don't know. I think that that's very ingrained in their culture. So I don't think that electricity will really take it away so much. But maybe there will come a time. It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, but.
Where I was in Peace Corps, Mali was the site of a major hydroelectric dam.
Oh, wow.
And so the question of electricity, it comes from somewhere, and somebody pays for it. And so it might have changes within the town, but wherever it's coming from, like the people who lived where that dam was, and they had to be resettled, I mean, it didn't help their communities, right? And like somebody's going to have to pay for it, and depending on how that works, it may alter social structures and reciprocity relationships if you know that you have to save some money to pay the bill if you know the money. But it's a great question, right? Because I don't think anyone, when I was there in the mid-90s, would have anticipated cell phones becoming so ubiquitous and so transformative and in such a short amount of time. And the adoption of cell phones in some places in Africa was faster than in some communities in the U.S. because of the value of it. It's incredible, but really interesting question. Hard to answer.
So you gave us this nice comparison of sort of community living and working together in Mali, and then right here in Santa Fe. So obviously it's possible in both places. But I'm just wondering if you could address some of the challenges of the larger cultural differences, because if you're talking about a village, or even a larger village like Jenne in Mali, you're talking about a community of people who are living maybe a little more slowly than we might be used to, living in a maybe slightly more communal way than we're used to, but they're still living in Mali, right?
Right.
Where things in general are more communal and slow and so forth. I mean, one of the big jokes, anywhere you live in Africa, people like to talk about Africa time.
Right.
Which, let's be honest, we're in New Mexico. We understand that to a certain degree. But it's even more so in places like Mali and other places in Africa. So, taking it to this community in Santa Fe, you talked and showed us pictures of a community that is working well, but it's still, stuck, or maybe I shouldn't use a negative word. It's still surrounded. Even though that we are in New Mexico, it's still surrounded by a community that's pretty, watch dependent, and stores open at 9 and close at whenever, and the trains run on time and so forth. So I'm wondering how much more difficult it is to deal with that larger cultural context here as opposed to in Mali.
That's an interesting question. In the Commons, when you talk about time, our dinners are at 6:15 sharp. Everybody's in circle, and we're going to have dinner at 6:15. And that's just the way it is, right? And so we do have that American culture embedded in this community culture. And the Malians have their way of doing it. So this is, our way is different. And yes, we have to go to school on time and work on time and all of that. So I don't feel like the time piece plays as big a role in the building of community. I think you can build community totally separate from that time question. But it does take time to do it. So, for example, we just had work day at the Commons on Saturday, and on work days, it's once a month, one Saturday a month. 8:30, breakfast is served. There's a list of things that need to get done. And people choose what they want to do, and they go out and do their thing or whatever until 12:30, and then lunch is served. And then we get on with the rest of our days and the rest of our weekends. So it is a slowing down to do that. You're working towards the community. What I found, though, is it's not that different from when we had our own house with our own yard work to do and our own, maintenance and whatever. Now it's just the at least the front space of the house, it's communal. So you're weeding in front of your house still, but it's communal work now. You know what I mean? So I don't find the time. We're in the American culture, I guess I should say, in terms of time, but we are taking time out for these things, or we're just realigning our time. We're adjusting how we use it. I don't know if that really answers your question. That's how it feels.
Sharing time or.
Yeah, but then again, sometimes I'll cook the meal, and it can take all day. You do the shopping, and but then again, I don't have to cook most nights, and so then I don't have as much time spent doing that. So it's just a shift in time, I think. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
I noticed here that, like in the U.S., like it's kind of looked down upon to ask for help. Like it makes you look weak, I guess, in a sense. Is it the same in Mali?
Oh no! I see you shaking your head in the back, like no. I don't think people really help each other out, and I think, especially in a society like that. Well, first of all, they don't have. One of the things I was thinking about is they don't have refrigeration, right? So if you slaughter a goat for your family, you're not going to be able to eat the whole thing, right, by yourself. You're going to share it with other people because otherwise it will just go bad, right? So there's very much a sharing culture there that's just ingrained. And yes, I don't think asking for help is nearly as kind of taboo as it might be here sometimes. And I'll just for the record, at the Commons too, we're always asking each other for help. It's like, like I said, the egg thing or whatever it is. Does anybody have an avocado or whatever? Or can somebody help me? My pilot light went out and I can't get it started. And then somebody's there to help all the time. And that's another big thing that I've learned is that, and probably everybody else knows this already. It just took me a while, but the more you help someone, the better you feel. Right? And so you're helping them, yes, but you're getting your own benefit out of it. And so that's very much in the culture, say at the Commons and in Mali. I think people are anxious to help people because they get a benefit. They feel good about themselves. They feel good about what they're doing. And so, I think the more we can all embrace that attitude, I think the happier we'll all be, right? Yeah. Anything else?